So first and foremost, congratulations on your beautiful piece.
Thank you. Same
That
to
was
you.
absolutely fantastic. Um, yeah, I think that everything, the execution, prioritizing Black joy, just like really immortalizing all of that was really well done. So
Thanks.
hats off.
Appreciate that.
So I kind of layered a lot of my questions into one. So I'm just gonna spill.
Go for it.
With the collaborative nature of the film industry, can you speak to your experience of shaping the concept of face as the pandemic hit? How were you able to work around certain constraints, and what do you think prepared you within your career to be able to successfully problem solve?
Yeah. I mean, so this was one of the bigger films I've produced and directed. It was the first time I worked with two artists, and they happened to be on opposite coasts. So Overcast is in Oakland and Navy Blue is in Brooklyn. And one of the main challenges I had was finding a way to involve both of them. I didn't want to like try to cut corners and just feature Overcast. And part of that too is it just felt like they were both really integral to like what makes that song so good. So we came up with an idea we really liked and kind of had this like really ambitious idea with a large crew and a lot of gear. And as we were kind of wrapping up pre-pro, COVID started coming to America and California. And like 3 days before shelter in place happened, we realized like we couldn't shoot, we needed to cancel it. So we basically canceled the whole project, and I spent the next like month on the couch just kind of feeling completely deflated. And eventually, after a bunch of just like watching a lot of movies and drinking a lot and wasting a lot of time, like was just like I have to like make something. So I texted Silas Overcast and asked him like, was there any way that he thought we could like rework this idea and find something that was still feasible? And so he was down to try it. We threw everything out, started over, and kind of created this like simpler idea, this direction of sort of bringing his inner world to life. Sort of starting in this like really cold blue setup, sort of representing where he's at the beginning of the song, and then as he opens up, kind of the setting and the vibe opens up as well, sort of ending with this like really kind of like triumphant moment where he's like outside with his face to the sun. And then the tribute at the end was an idea that Silas had about really trying to connect like this to like a larger story than just what he's talking about, and it being a more universal story and really applicable to sort of the Black experience. And I felt like that was like a really beautiful touch that kind of like elevated the whole thing. So as far as like what prepared me to work around constraints and problem solve, I think I kind of came to directing through art direction and more like commercial work, doing a lot of work in like marketing and design at a lot of the big tech companies. And they all take this like really iterative approach to building stuff. So you start with a shitty first draft, you share it, you get feedback, you improve it, and you just kind of repeat that process. And so I've tried to take that same approach to creative development and filmmaking, which I think has been really helpful for maintaining momentum. And for me, that's like one of the most important things to like any projects being any good. So part of how I've realized you do that is just don't let anything get in the way. Like it was funny because at those jobs, I saw people working on projects I did not care about at all, like be tenacious and like push things through that like seemed impossible. And I was just really inspired by that, and kind of have been for the last few years trying to like only say yes to projects that inspire that sort of commitment in myself. And this was one of those projects. It felt like it was something I couldn't not make, that it was too important. So
yeah,
just kept pushing. Don't give up.
yeah, that's so incredibly important. I think specifically too, also in the Bay Area. I mean, well, now with the pandemic, no one really could work at that point, but just like the time management of like seeing passions and like art projects through and just like scheduling around that, I think is really important to just like keep at.
Totally. Yeah, it's like when it's not like when you don't have a client who's kind of like chasing you down, like it's easy to let this stuff take forever. And I think like I've tried to treat every project as though I have a client like that, and this was kind of the same thing. It was like as soon as I saw like open windows, I like jumped through them, because it felt like after that first sort of reschedule, it was like I may not get a chance to make this if I don't like push hard.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, timeliness is
Yeah,
definitely a thing within the film industry, I'm learning.
totally. I love how playful your video is too. I mean, I think like it looked super fun to make. I think it does a really good job of capturing this feeling of like having a really good cocktail or a late night with friends. Like
Yeah.
time isn't totally linear. It feels more elastic and sort of ethereal. And like the Sherry Godmother sort of being what facilitates that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at that moment, just because like it was such a weird time, like I started the idea specifically as feeling as though it was like a twisted sick day, like when you're in like elementary school and you're
Getting
watching like
drunk
really
instead.
weird daytime TV, like that's like where
Yeah.
I'm starting at. Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about how the project came about and sort of like what that was like to make in quarantine? Because you guys basically did everything in your apartment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
It's not even a studio apartment.
So it started with, I was approached by a very good friend of mine, Kevin Dahl, who works with Ford's Gin. I've worked with that client prior. And they really just wanted to do anything that they could to just like provide support for creatives, for bartenders, like everyone that had been hit really hard from the pandemic, and who had been laid off and stuff like that. So they provided budget, and their simple ask was, as a bartender, can you create a video of you making a cocktail? And I was like, well, of course I'm gonna go crazy. Like, so yeah, they gave us like a month or two to just create something, to create that. And they were very happy with that. So that was exciting. But yeah, we turned the house into a staging area.
Yeah,
where
half the kitchen's a staging area, and the rest of it is a studio.
Yeah. That was
awesome.
super fun. And we just like shot at nighttime, maybe like over 3 or 4 nights.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
2 shots a night or so.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people view some of those constraints, like especially now, and I think like early on in quarantine, when you were saying, it was sort of like, are we ever going to be able to make anything? I think like everybody sort of views those constraints as sort of like barriers to being able to pull anything off. So I guess like my final question would be like, what do you say to somebody who kind of wants to do something similar but doesn't think they have either the gear, the experience, the space, the whatever? Like there's always something.
Yeah, specifically, I mean, like in that instance, like I would say that I'm like pretty young in my career of working within the film industry, and just like always reach out to friends, like reach out to community, like everyone is always down to help out. Like we wouldn't have been able to reach the sort of like elevation and quality that we wanted to provide if it wasn't for our friend Mackenzie, who like lent a camera, and just like my friend Michael, James Wavy, who were the performer, like he was just like, yes, absolutely, like you can write to my music, like that's go for it, you know. So I think it's just reaching out to community is really important.
On set was a crew of 2, but there was a lot of other people behind making it possible, all reaching out to friends.
And I think
Chris Galdis.
I think a lot of times people are like afraid to ask, and I think like you were saying, like a lot of times like people are down to like help on stuff, especially if it's a cool idea like this. And it's like not being kind of shameless and like not being afraid to call in favors.
Oh yeah, everybody's super down. If it's not a tech commercial,
go
for it. Bless your heart.
Hey, well, we love tech commercials, but this is
Well, I'm going to be shameless right now and jump in. But that was a really cool discussion. We're going to bring in a question from the audience that actually applies to both groups. So we'll start with Skyler on this one. You guys both, have done work, a lot of branded work before, Skyler particularly in Facebook, at Facebook. So how did, I guess, your work, your previously branded work, inform how you approach completely like much more like personal projects from a more creative perspective?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. Like, I think I initially started in design, and then my team kind of became this like in-house agency for Facebook. And so we sort of went through this phase of learning how to create campaign work and film work specifically. And one of the guys that I worked under was a really great mentor, like was always trying to like bring this element of artistry to like every project, like almost to an obnoxious extent. But I think like what that did for me was just sort of show that like there were always ways to like elevate projects. And so I think like that was something that really stuck with me. And then like I mentioned earlier, like the sort of like iterative approach to building projects has really stuck with me. And just like being sort of shameless about like asking for feedback and not being afraid of like putting stuff out there. Like that's still really uncomfortable and hard for me to do, but I think like those two experiences really stuck with me and have been super valuable for doing this kind of work now.
That's really cool. I mean, it's cool how you're pulling from certain frameworks and paradigms from Silicon Valley, from the Bay, you know?
Yeah.
Applying that to directing, which seems like so other ends of the spectrum, but there's kind of a beautiful thing about that. All right, so totally. Dan and Deb, same question. I mean, I think this is a really interesting question for you because what you created was a branded piece that felt completely full of soul and devoid of any like corporate brand, which is so freaking cool. So like, how do you guys navigate that?
I mean, I guess you start with the vision and then figure out how to fit the brand in rather than the other way around. Start making something you love and then insert whatever needs to be inserted.
Gotta work with the brands you work with, Dan. I like that.
No clients on set.
What I think, as far as just like the branded stuff that I have done, I've gotten a lot of those connections through previous work within the service industry. So a lot of it does have to do within like the cocktail scope. And that sort of like clientele in particular is like really about creativity. So I've been extremely lucky in that regard to just like be able to go nuts. and as long as like I fit, like for Ford specifically, it's just like, no, of course, like, please don't be offensive. And because you have to tell people that, and like, just make sure that we can speak to just like the brand as a whole. Like the brand is specifically really about creatives. So that worked beautifully with the idea of being able to really like emote in a weird, twisted kind of way about like the strange time that's happening right now. Yeah. So it was kind of like a little bit of both, dipping my toe into knowing what the client needed, and then writing a story around that, and then also just like meeting in the middle of like checking back in to make sure I didn't like go too far out. And Dan's always really good about within like the writing scope of ensuring that like technically everything can be sound and made. Yeah.
Especially when things are tricky, you're writing something for yourself, which is an old like film school rule. Like, don't make it too complicated.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Dare to dream.
Struck this balance where it served your creativity in such a massive way. Yeah, that was like, it's something to strive for, I think, for a lot of us filmmakers. So you guys are gonna sign off. I'm gonna miss the three of you. Feel free to jump into the live chat. Natalia Dominguez has one other question, and the question is more Deb ? And she asked that about like 4 times. So the legendary actress herself is asking for more Deb on screen. So sorry, Natalia, she's gonna have to go right now, but we're gonna move to the next one. You guys were amazing. Thank you guys. I'll see you soon.
Thank you guys.